good afternoon, everyone. Hello, Christina. Hello, Dreamlab. Hello, Julia V, who's right here with me. Not contagion free today, but she's healthy. So, thank you for everyone for asking. Hello, Biscuits. Hello, Rod. Hello, everybody. Have I forgotten somebody? I hope I haven't. I always worry when I forget one of you. I'm so glad you can join me today. And I'm very sad, of course, to hear, Rod, that you've got the cooties, as they say over here. I don't actually know how you spell that. How do you spell cooties? Is it Coodies? That sort of thing? I don't know. One of those things. And I'm also, so I hope you're going to feel better very soon. There's, of course, Aleve and what we know as paracetamol. Hopefully that's going to help you out. It's called acetaminophen over here. It's the same substance. I don't know why it's called two different things on both sides of the Atlantic. I have no idea. But I'm just as sad to hear about the troubles with Christina's main board. That sucks indeed, but at least that's an explanation. I've done so much research about how to get my RTX 2080 running properly, and it appears to be, everyone is saying, well, it's got to be the power supply or it's a faulty card. And it turns out neither of that is true. And also it doesn't explain why my card is working fine 98% of the time, but only crashes occasionally. So on that note, if you are in the market for a new main board, perhaps have a look at a completely new computer, by which I don't mean, Christina, a new computer, I mean an old computer. I have literally yesterday, I'm so excited, I've posted a video about this on my other channel. Something has arrived. I want to show you that. It's so exciting. It's even bigger than the previous one. Look at that. This is my new HP Z800 Workstation. It's huge. Let's put that over here. And I've ordered it because it has twice the power of my other computer, which is the Z600. Whoops. Network cable still attached. Here it is, slightly slimmer and slightly slimmer. So there we go. Those are the three computers and the one I'm using. It looks exactly like that. That's what I'm dealing with right now. I'm building these up from scratch. So they used to be between $5,000 and $8,000 and $10,000, and they're now available for literally just less than $200 on eBay, and they're still just as good as they once were. And you add a good graphics card, and we'll see what happens. It's I don't know. It turns out it's my new hobby. I don't know, one of those things. So yes, that's happening for me. I hope it's going to go. I hope we're all going to feel well after a chillaxed 3D fiddling session. So what have I got planned for you today? It is inspired by our latest Subnautica stream, if I may say so. There's an article I've written about, look at that, in April 2015, and that's called Skeleton at the Graveyard. Let me just play that, and let's see if we can watch it in full screen. Can we? We can. Look at that. That's good. No, I didn't want to see that. There we go. Perhaps with slightly higher quality, and I had imagined. So this is what kind of inspired that, what we did with Subnautica. This is fog. This is volumetric fog in the background that's rising up, and the skeleton, well, it's got a cloth animation over it. So we're not going to deal with that. It's not about the cloth animation. Can we see that again? Let's see that again. There we go. I'm putting a link to this whole article, how I've made this little animation, as well as the YouTube video in the description, in the comments of in the description of this video, in this live stream. So what I've made here is, if I just pause this, what I've made here, this is just a cutout at the back. This is the skeleton from, is it the DAS skeleton or is it the Polar skeleton? I can't remember. It's one of those skeletons, and it's received a cloth draping in Marvelous Designer. But what I wanted to talk about today is literally the fog in the background. I've looked into how to make fog in Poser, not in Poser, I'm so sorry, too many 3D applications. I've looked into how to make it in Blender, and even though it works, it's just a gray soup. It doesn't move, so it does show us this thing that items are far away in our scene, but it doesn't necessarily move, and that's what this can do, and that's why I thought this is really interesting. Carrara does this, and that's why we're going to use Carrara. But we're not going to do much else in Carrara. I'm going to show you around the application a little bit in case you haven't ever used Carrara. It's one of those Swiss Army knives of 3D. It can do so many things really easily if you get used to the interface, and volumetric fog and oceans and clouds and all those things are basically built in. So we're going to have a look at how to make that in Carrara and export it as an image sequence with transparency, and that'll create a video that you'll be able to basically use either on planes in something like DAZ Studio or in video games, and that's what I'm trying to do. And it's kind of, I came to that because when we did the Subnautica Saturday stream last Saturday, this was it. This is the part about 2 hours and 15 minutes in, just before the computer crashed. And let me just go and do that in full screen here. This effect up here, this is what kind of caught my attention. This looks like there's smoke crawling on the ceiling, so there's stuff burning here, and it's kind of, you know, burning up here, and there's obviously smoke crawling away at the ceiling. But it's a trick, so this is not volumetric. In this case, I believe if I jump up in a moment, which I can't do, I haven't got the control, I'm just, you know, looking at the video stream, we can see that this fog here, this crawling fog, is literally just a plane on which a video file is applied or an animation is applied. And that's quite clever because it saves a lot of, here, as you can see that this is actually just a two-dimensional plane there that's happening, and the fog looks very realistic. So this over here, that is actually volumetric fog, but the stuff that we see on the ceiling, this is not volumetric. That's literally just a two-dimensional plane. So there we go. That's what I'm trying to do today, and you know, let's see if and how successful I'll be with that. And then, of course, tomorrow we're going to play some more Subnautica, see if we can find any other exciting effects that we can recreate. Righty, let's jump in and let's start up Carrara and have a look at that old lady of a 3D application here. Yes, Christina, I do have a few websites. I do get frequently confused. verslewis.com is my personal website on which I have things like 3D articles mainly and just other personal stuff. And then the wpguru.tv or .co.uk, they're kind of the same domain. That's about technical bits and bobs, just how to do things in Windows and Linux and Mac OS. And the verslewis.com is more about creative softwares and all that. There we go. So, oh, very nice, Rod. Thank you so much. I might just live check your link out there. I did look at your movie poster that you did there. Oh yes, of course. I've seen that yesterday. Yes, the movie almost looks like a movie poster. I thought it was very funky. How did you do that, Rod? How did you make that that fog? Is that brushes? Is that created? And does that animate more to the point? Let's have a look around Carrara. So, I must say, Carrara is, hands up first of all, how many people have used Carrara here, because it's one of those very underrated programs. It has a slightly wonky interface because it's been not really worked at for the last 20 years, maybe 15 years, 10 years. I think the last update didn't really do any new features in there. It was just one of those things that they just made, they tried to make the Genesis 2 figure compatible with it. So it's got a slightly outdated interface. At the top right here, you may recognize this, the hand and these things. Those are akin to the rooms in Poser. So render is the render room, and this is the texture room, and this is the storyboard room, which no one ever uses. This is the modeling room, and this is the assemble room. So Carrara is cool in that oh, I'm so sorry. It used to be. Is it back? Sorry about that. There we go. It should be back. So it used to be a competitor to Poser. So it used to be able to use all native Poser content before Poser and DAZ fragmented quite so much, and it still is capable of handling that. But it's not just a content what's it called, manipulation program. It's also a content creation program, Carrara is. And that's what makes it so cool. So you don't have to just bring in content and then assemble it in the scene. You can build your own primitives, or you can make your own 3D objects out of primitives and just keep, have all these building tools like you do in Blender, basically. So it's kind of a mixture between DAZ Studio and Blender, if you will. Very interesting. Sometimes it's on offer for less than $50. It's well worth looking into if you have a bit of money to spare there. So we'll stick in the assemble room so far, and on the bottom here, these are sky presets. You've got a lot of preset scenes here at the very bottom. That's called the browser, and we can load any of these in, including indoor scenes. They're all very simply done, and then we just hit render and see what happens. But of course, you can create your own, so packaging material and stuff. Objects, there's a huge object library that comes with it, so including landscapes as well as skies and oceans and waterscapes and all that. Tropical island, let's try that. So just double click that, and then it comes in like that. Looks pretty, devastating, but that's literally just the ground shaded workspace here. Once you frame that up, we can probably just have a quick look at what that would look like rendered. Control R does that, and there's not a lot of light in the scene right now. That was probably a bad example. Perhaps we're going to go and pick a different scene just to get us warmed up and started here. Perhaps volcanic. This thing that doesn't look good either. Let's go with something like a desert scene here, rocky desert perhaps. Let's do that. It should really save some camera presets with it, but I guess it doesn't really do that. I'm not entirely sure why. It's been a while since I've looked at Carrara, I must say, so maybe those scenes don't really do it justice of what we want to do. Let's start with our own scene, really. I'm going to go and create a scene. It does so under File, New, and then that brings up this so-called scene wizard that lets us either create a preset or start from a preset, or start with a landscape wizard, or we can create an empty scene. Perhaps we're going to do that just for kicks. Perhaps we're going to start with a preset. Let's do that. And in the preset, oh, I see. Now it says what you want to do. What type of sky would you like to use? Perhaps Californian sky. Let's start with that, and that will give us an empty scene with the Californian sky. Hopefully, let's see how correct we are there. Before we click render, which is Command R, we can head over to the actual render settings and make sure we're rendering in the correct dimensions. So that's up here on the output tab. It is very confusing if you're not quite used to working with it. Let's do something like 1280 by 720, and then we keep the resolutions. Once we've done that, we can go back to our scene, which doesn't show anything, probably because it only has a sky applied right now. We can go and say show the production frame, and that is the same thing as the aspect frame in DAZ Studio. So you can just have a look what's actually going to end up rendered on your application there, in your scene. So if I select that, then I get this rectangle. And I can also go and zoom in on that somehow, I believe, like so. And that will now let me position my camera. So right now, I guess we're just going to see some sky. Let me try it out. There we go. That is literally just the sky. We also get a default ground plane. So the gray sludge at the bottom here, that is the default ground plane, but we can add other things to it. But it's kind of nice to get started with something like a background that already looks like something. These clouds can be manipulated, they can be animated. Everything in Carrara can be animated, including fire and smoke, fog, that's what we're going to use, but also water and trees and all kinds of things. So it's very, very exciting stuff, what you can do there. So let's go and frame that scene up slightly differently. Maybe just show something something more of the ground. And also change the sky. Just wanted to show you how to change the sky. So if we render the scene again, there we go. This is the gray stuff. That's our ground now. And this is now our sky. And if we wanted to change the cloud pattern, for example, we can go ahead and do that on the scene tab. So that's at the bottom right here. This is actually a tab. This is basically our scene tab, this whole thing here. Camera is one thing, a light source is another, but the scene itself also has properties. And one of them is the realistic sky, which is how the sky thing is being created there. So if we go over there and edit that, then we get some other parameters here. One of them is we can just go in for a preview. One of them is the amount of cloud coverage we want to have here. Is this all in the scene there still? Hopefully is. I'm never entirely sure if it is there until 10 seconds later when I see the return here. So you can go and enable other parts of the cloud coverage here. So if the first one is now Cirrus Clouds, and if I wanted to change that into just regular clouds, then this is what they look like as opposed to Cirrus Clouds. But I can also change this to Altostratus or to something like Cirrostratus. And those are all different types of clouds, I guess. But I can also layer them on top of one another. So if we stay with Cirrus in the first layer, then I can enable this here as the second layer. And then on the second layer, I can say maybe I want Altostratus mixed in with my other clouds, which are the Cirrus Clouds. And then this is what my cloud coverage looks like. So pretty neat, really. And once you're happy with how your sky looks, you can go and render that scene again. And then the sky looks completely different. So that's kind of very, very cool way of getting interesting effects or interesting outdoor scenes going, including landscapes. So you've got a landscape generator, and as I said, the ocean generator. Perhaps we're gonna try and drop a landscape in. How's that? Let's try that. It'll be up here under insert. That's where you find all these goodies. So sphere, cube, cone, cylinder. Those are the primitives. And then you've got some other weird ones here: spline object, vertex object, metaball object. These are all editable with their own editing tools, whereas the regular primitives are not. That's the difference. And you've got formula and text, particle emitter, and then things like terrains and plants, so you can grow trees and bushes. Volumetric clouds, fire clouds, fountain, like a water fountain or particle fountain, fogs, and you've got replicators. We've also going to do hair and an ocean. It's very interesting. Let's try a terrain. Let's just drop a terrain in and see what happens. This is the whole terrain editor. So very, very complex thing. So it'll take a while to figure this thing out. But once again, what's kind of cool about Carrara is the fact that this is now generated from a noise map that it goes and creates on the fly. If you hit shuffle, it creates the noise map again. And then, take auto reset out here. So every time I hit shuffle, the map is generated slightly differently. You can have a look at the outcome, and you can see when you've got something that you like. And once again, you can stack different effects. So this is kind of a regular mountain range here. But if you wanted something else, you come up here to the filter layers, and you can add just something else. It always comes up with a null generator. I'm not entirely sure why, but if you click this over, and instead of going to filter, you click on the generator, you can create something like a mesa or a hill or a smooth mountain or plain. My favorite, I must admit, is the mesa. So let's go and add one. And now we have both of these things. We have a mountain and a mesa, but each of these have different parameters. So we can adjust what we want to do here, just as a brief introduction. So if we have both of these together, this is my mesa now here, and it's overlaid on top of the mountain range. So if I wanted to go and shuffle this, then every time I do that, the mountain range and the mesas look completely different. If I wanted more mesas, I could just click on the mesas and then say mesa amount. I suppose this is a 1.1. Can I do more? I guess I can't do more than that. I thought you could do more mesas. Perhaps it works with the feature size. You can make these features larger or smaller. You can make them higher or lower. So let's see if we can find something interesting here. Perhaps that's nice. It's got a big fat mesa in the middle, and yeah, that's nice to get going. Resolution can be set to something slightly higher up here. Preview and render quality. I'm just going to make the render quality a little bit bigger. Perhaps that's a little bit too big. Yeah, that's good. 1025. That's cool. And our preview is going to be a little bit more low resolution. There, that's cool. Once we're done, all we need to do is just click over into our other room. Notice that Carrara is automatically kind of, that's right, Rod, it is very similar to Vue, and it's probably made by similar people in a similar kind of time frame. It's about 25 years ago or something the development on this started, and Carrara's been made by the people who made Hexagon as well, Eovia, and then DAS thought we're going to buy it and then not do anything with it, just to buy another poser competitor off the market. Crazy. But hey, yeah, hence the same room philosophy as in many of the other programs. So it's dropped us into the model room, which is, depending on what type of thing you're editing, is always going to be a little bit different. So the ocean room is going to look different than the meta, or the meta bore modeler or the vertex modeler and all. So that's all, that's how that works. So in order to go back and see this in our actual scene, we can go over to the hand icon, and then that means we're back in the scene building view here, where we're going to now look at our landscape from the bottom. That's not good, is it? Let's look at it from somewhere like here. And we've got that mesa and hopefully a nice horizon in the background. Let's see what that looks like if we go and render it. I'm just going to frame that little corner out. And so we've got a mountain range and a bit of a mesa here. It looks like a mushy mess, but as soon as we render it, we should see this in slightly higher resolution. And there we go. We can see that. Yeah, exactly. Just buy the company off the face of the earth so that they don't interfere with our precious business plans. Crazy, isn't it? So this ugly gray mess, that doesn't look great here, but what we can do is we can add an infinite ocean to it. We can also use a different shader on here so that the shader doesn't look like green and brown here. That's pretty easy. That's also pretty cool. Maybe I'll show you that. There is Carrara has this thing that is called a shader browser. Very cool. So under browser down here on the bottom left, we have all these objects here, but we have one thing also that's called shaders. So content and smart content is a bit like in DAS Studio, is both integrated. This is a regular content tab from your DAS content. And then there's also smart content, which sometimes works, sometimes doesn't. And you can map your poser runtime directly to this and then bring in the poser shaders directly into Carrara, and Carrara will understand most of them. But Carrara has a shader browser as well. And that works a little bit like the shader browser we have in DAS Studio. Very exciting stuff. So my shaders is empty, but look at the glass shaders. I mean, there's just so many. And there's metal shaders, and there's miscellaneous shaders like weird shaders, nature shaders, and they're all represented by this little ball, and they're very intricate to set up. So Carrara's render engine isn't really compatible with anything else. But it's one of those things, it does do a good job. It's a biased render engine, and any of these things can just be dragged on to any of your objects in the scene. So in my case, I'd like to use a terrain shader. So let me go over to the terrain tab, and then I'll pick something that looks exciting. Maybe Dream Beach. We're in Miami. Let's go with the beach perhaps. Yeah. Let's go and drag that over here. Dream Beach. Or Tepui, maybe Tepui. Is it Tepui or is it Tapui? Don't know. We'll just go and drag that from here until my object that I want to apply it to lights up. I let it go. Again, the preview in this scene doesn't really do it justice until I hit Command R, and then we can see that, well, aside from the ugly pixelation here, we have a different shader on our object. So that is kind of cool. Let me do something about the light here while I'm at it. That's under rendering, and I'll use full ray tracing, and that should do the trick. Maybe a bit of skylight here. Yeah, there we go. A Let's apply a different shader and then see what else we can do. Perhaps Tapui wasn't so good. Let's go with Rocky Desert. Drop that on there. Very different outcome. Command R. Let me have a look at that. So that's much nicer. That's much nicer. I still don't really understand what these squares are all about, but hey, one of those things. Let me show you one last neat trick while we're talking about the landscapes. What I like to do is to drop an ocean onto this here, so that much like in View or in Bryce, in fact, you drop an ocean onto your scene, or even an infinite ocean, and then you just adjust it to the height of about here, so that most of this landscape is underwater, and you've got beautiful reflecting water shader there, which also animates. That's kind of the beauty of it. Let's try that next. So that'll be another object. I can close the browser down, I believe, with Control B. Then we get this full preview here. Browser goes away. It's kind of nice. You can do that with at the top here with Insert Ocean. And when we do that, we get this kind of little preview here. And that's the ocean plane and its location here. So we can now bring it up to somewhere where we like it. We can either use a replicator or we can just scale it. Kind of depends on what you want to do. You can, with a replicator, you can add these tiles next to one another and they'll be seamless. So that's another interesting concept there. I'm going to just go and try and scale this up just to show you the concept. And perhaps this is a good, maybe we'll do it this way. I still don't really like the idea that we don't see much of the back here. We still see that ugly gray, the ugly gray kind of background there. But we're not going to worry about it because really this episode is about fog and how to extract something meaningful out of Carrara. Oh yeah, by the way, this grid here. If you see that grid here, you can switch that off as well. If that's in the way, which I frequently find it is, you can head over here to the top right and just click these icons on and off. If I do that, like the YZ grid and the XZ grid, if I just go and switch those off, then they're gone. So it's, it's much nicer on the eye. So once we position our water somewhere here, let's see what happens when we render it again. Water comes into play. Very nice. It's got reflections and it literally took no time. Once you know your way around the interface, it's really nice and easy to keep building scenes with Carrara. And if you have a bit of patience, you can literally animate this over several frames and you can see that the water is moving slightly and does a really gentle, nice effect, and including the clouds. So the clouds also animate. It's very interesting stuff. Let's try and frame that ugly gray stuff out. Drop the water down a little bit more. You can also, if you don't like the current water shader, you can just apply another water shader to the ocean. So there's a lot of potential in this. Perhaps I'm going to do more Carrara tutorials in the future. I just can't remember all the intricate details. I've been doing a lot with Carrara 5-6 years ago, and it's so much fun to play with it. So yeah, highly recommend it. So there we go. Let's start with a new scene and get into this little bit of animation thing and how to make fog. Actually, I can probably show you fog. Maybe we can add some fog on top of this this little icon, the little island here. If we just make some fog right here, we just ignore that because I've forgotten how to get rid of it, truth be told. But we've got our sky, we've got our water, we've got a landscape. Let's make something like something that perhaps burns here. We can fire. Let's start with a fire. That's a cool idea. Let's put a fire right up here, or right up here perhaps. Fire is just as easy to handle as both the terrain and the ocean. By the way, actually, this is one thing I should mention. We're currently looking through a camera here, camera 1. And Carrara creates a default camera. DAZ Studio doesn't do that. It only gives us the perspective view to wander around. But Carrara gives us a camera. And on top of that, it also gives us what Carrara calls the director's view, and you can change that by literally clicking this here. You've got the camera one right now, that's the one that we should frame up and leave untouched, and then we have the left, right, top, bottom, front and back views, in addition to the director's camera. And the director's camera, if we click that, then we can wander around without tweaking our view that we've so meticulously set up here. This is the camera, and this is all the other pieces of our scene right now. So let's see how we can add just a fire on top of that mountain. So it's it's roughly about here, I guess. Once again, it's as simple as using the insert menu and picking fire from the list. And that'll come in somewhere in the middle of the scene with the regular 3D manipulation gadget, so we can go and drag that up. It's just a box right now because this is an effect that is literally rendered at the moment it's being rendered, so we can't really preview it as such. We've got several options that we can tweak there, and we can make some adjustments, but really to get an accurate view, we're going to have to look at what this looks like in the rendered scene. So since I don't really know where that is right now, I'm just going to go and eyeball it into the very middle. I hope it's not going to float or is not sunken in too much. Let me go back to my camera and see where that is in relation to the to here. I wonder if it should be a little bit closer to the camera. Yeah, let me do that. Just see if that's any good here. So we have on the right hand side, we've got some options that we can fiddle with here really. So the fire can be contained in a box, a cylinder or a sphere, and that's important to remember because it's also the same for the fog. All these effects that are being dropped in during render time will be rendered either as literally as a square or as a cylinder or as a box. Some also being or as a sphere. That's also possible. Let's try a box. Shuffle will shuffle these values around, and once again this thing can be animated. Very interesting. If you render more than one frame in the course of an animation, it'll look like a proper fire. So very interesting. But of course that takes a lot of time. Let's see what that looks like with the fire. Can't argue with that. Mountain is on fire. It's kind of crazy, and it doesn't look that bad either. You can tweak the colors. You can do all kinds of things. Perhaps I can zoom in here a little bit. Whoops, that was a little bit too much, huh? There. Mountain on fire. And you can make it bigger or smaller. So if you wanted the flames to be slightly bigger now, we can make that happen by simply scaling up the box. So let's go and use that 3D. This is the universal manipulator tool here. This is basically move, this is scale, this is rotate, and this is the universal tool that has all the options on it. So if I'm just going to do that and just go and make it taller and just move it up, then maybe the flames will go out of the out of our view, possibly. There, let's see what that looks like. Taller flames. There we go, taller flames. Very exciting. All these squares, by the way, these are all the threads that the computer is currently rendering at. So these are all, each tile is one render thread, and Carrara doesn't use the GPU at all. So it doesn't really care what GPU you have. It could be a really old one, a really bad one, and it still does a remarkable job, I must say. So that is, in a nutshell, how you assemble scenes together. So with us, we could do this with fire. We could literally just drop a fire into an empty scene and frame it up nicely, and then just go and have the fire burn. Perhaps we'll do that at the end, just for kicks. But I was going to do this with fog to go back to the subject matter. How do you create some volumetric fog? It's exactly like that. Perhaps we'll put some fog right here next to it, and we see both of these things side by side. So once again, it's as easy as going up to insert fog. And once you do that, it'll just drop in another unsuspecting box at the bottom here. And we should really have a look at that from the top so we get an accurate representation of where that is in relation to the fire. If this is our camera here, then I guess the fog should be somewhere maybe here. I don't want to put it over here because that'll be over the water. That's not a good idea. So we'll just put that here because that should still be in vision. And to get bearings of how high this is, I can always use the front view, of course. To move this, to pan this around, whoops, that was not good, was it? To pan this around, I have to use the W key and hold that down. I don't really know why, but W and left click and drag will pan the scene. Whoops, universal I was thinking, and also this thing. Let's try it out, see if that looks like what I'd expect it to look. Well, I can barely see anything. I can see the fire, but I think this is the fog. Perhaps it's just not very, it's not really showing up. I can see just a tiny bit of little bit of grayness here, but that's not really what I had expected, to be honest. So let's have a look why that isn't working. Maybe it's just a bit too small. Maybe just make it a bit bigger. Whoops, there, massive fog. And you can also make it, you can scale it into this direction to make it thicker fog. Perhaps, perhaps it's going to be a really foggy day, who knows, and it's going to be one of those fogs that's kind of lying over the ocean here, like that. What do you think? That could be, that's realistic, isn't it? Let's see what that's like if we go and render that. So we should see a lot of fog now all over the place in front of the island and encapsulating the island. And to my surprise, as much as to your own surprise, I can't really see the effect. I can see it's a little bit more grayed out, but it's very, very subtle. So I don't see it being that dramatic, that pronounced. So perhaps there's a way we can just make that a bit thicker. There's other options here on the right-hand side where we can either shuffle the parameters, or we can go and crank up the quantity and the swirls and then the density. Perhaps the density, I'm going to make that a bit more dense here, maybe 2. Patchiness, there's a bit of patchiness in here. Upward speed, those are important for animating. Maybe quantity, we're going to set that to 2 as well. Perhaps give it a few swirls, there we go. And let's see what that's going to be like. Okay, certainly getting foggier, I can see that. And you can literally see the fog here. It's still very subtle, so I don't want to, for a real picture, you wouldn't want to overdo this, but to make it show up on a live stream, I suppose it's best to just overdo the effect. So I can see little foggy patches here and swirls here. So this is kind of what I want, more or less without the background. And that's what we're going to do in a moment. So if we don't have an island and a fire and some water, we'll just go and literally just create fog in front of a black background. And that can be rendered out as an image sequence, and that's what we're going to be using. That's the theory anyway. And hopefully it's going to look a little bit like what we've seen in the game there. So let's see what happens if we make it even bigger. Is that, I think I'm on... density is already cranked up. Upward speed, I'm going to leave all these things as they are. Perhaps the quantity I'm going to crank up to 5. So let's see what happens now. Is this going to be really foggy, or does the quantity not really matter? Oh yeah, I can see that the density as such hasn't increased, but I can certainly see a more pronounced fog effect here in front of the island. So that's nice. That's nice. Perhaps I'm going to remember those types of parameters and start with another scene and see if we can render out what I had planned for today. So we've cranked up the quantity and the density. Okay, great. Let's do this with a brand new scene. I'm going to go and select an empty scene, just a medium empty scene. And if I do that, that's all I'll see. If I happen to render that scene now, oh, and also I suppose I'm going to have to go and make sure that my output is set correctly. It always resets that to 640 by 480, and you can kind of guess that this is which era this program comes from, because 16 by 9 didn't work at that time. 4 by 3 was the major standard, and who would ever in their right mind render an image that's larger than 640 by 480? I mean, seriously. So there we go. That's, that's Carrara for you. So let's go and do this in 16 by 9 and show us the production frame and see what we get if we just render this. Nothing. This is kind of what we're expecting. I'm talking about this more in my Dash Studio lighting series. It's a good idea because I know 800 by 600 is just so big. I mean, you're looking at, like, what was it, 256 megabytes of RAM, and that's just, those were the limitations of the time. One of those things. We get a completely black picture for the fact that there's nothing in there. There's no objects in there and there's no light in there. And that's kind of what I would expect when I start, because I have to set everything up from scratch. Dash Studio doesn't work that way. And I'm talking more about this in my latest video that's going to premiere tomorrow at 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. It'll be a double bill. It'll be that premiere at 3, and then it'll be Subnautica Saturday at 4. It's going to be exciting. Rod's looking forward to that video already. And I've decided to split this lighting thing in Dash Studio into at least 5 parts. And the first part is when we render a default scene with Dash Studio, why does it come up with several lights in the scene? What does it mean to interact with the surface parameters that you set and all that? So those will be discussed tomorrow at 3 p.m. Join me for the premiere. But for now, we have a black scene, and we should put something in there. Otherwise, we're not actually going to see anything. Well, actually, we do have something. We have one light and we have one camera, but the light isn't reflecting off anything right now unless we put something in. Let me illustrate that point. So we head over to insert perhaps a plane. We can insert a plane, or we can insert an infinite plane in Carrara. And that's a very cool concept. A plane, you can imagine, is just a 3D object, a finite 3D object that you can scale up and scale down, but an infinite plane will just reach as far as the 3D world is. And that is a really cool idea for a ground. It won't show up as infinite, so you can see this is finite, and you can go ahead and you can scale that. But it'll already render super large in the render. It's basically just replicating in the render, but we're only putting one object in, and that's all we need to do. We can also bring in an object like don't know, maybe a sphere. Yes, let's do that tomorrow, 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Biscuit. Let's bring coffee, and then we'll have a pre-Subnautica chat. That's going to be great. And I decided to make this into smaller bits, because then I can just focus on one area and not overload the viewer, because I've tried, I had several false starts with this. Such a complex subject matter, it just gets too long, really. We can just talk for 4 hours straight about lighting and still not really cover the basis. So I thought I'm going to turn it into snippets and explain one concept at a time, and hopefully that's going to be good. And like we see here in Carrara, lighting is literally everywhere, and it's just so important to understand the concepts there. So with our ground and our sphere in the scene, Control R will now show us that. We have an infinite plane, we have nothing in the background, we don't have a horizon or anything that's not in here, and we have like a default sphere in here. It has a little bit of a slightly shiny shader. We can see that little hotspot here, and we can see shadows. So everything that we would expect is coming in from a single light. Light is the only thing that I want to adjust. We do have, what is this type of light that we have in here? Let's have a look. Whoops. Oh, I've just parented something to something I didn't want to do. So there we go. This is the light in our scene tab, and it's represented just by an arrow up here. And that's the kind of Carrara's way of saying this is a light. And we can rotate that now, and that'll influence the shadow and the hotspot. I just wanted to check what type of light that is, and that is being shown here in this tab. It's a distant light. So in Carrara we can turn one light into another. That's very cool. In DAZ Studio we can't do that. We have to literally load another light in there. And in Carrara it's kind of cool to just go, actually I would like for this to be now a spotlight, or I'd like for that to be a sunlight. And that's very nice. Or, you know, currently it's a distant light, and let's leave it that way. Distant light, by the way, is one that only has a direction, and it doesn't matter where we put it. So if a distant light, if I move that way further to the left now, it'll still come from the same direction. It only has a direction, it hasn't got a location. That's the difference. So I think in my case, I'd like to rotate that a little bit so that we have a slightly larger shadow going off to the side here, something like that, and maybe something like that. And it doesn't matter if I move it up or down, it doesn't move, it doesn't change the quality of the light. Let's see what happens. There we go. It's slightly longer. It's slightly the shadow is slightly longer now, and the hotspot has moved locations on the sphere. So that's how I can tweak the lighting. I think for our fog that we want to generate, we'll just have to see what works best. I'm going to leave the light as it is. And if that's not what we're looking for, we can go and tweak it. For now, I'm going to go and select the sphere, move it over here, and put a blob of fog right here, just so that we can see these two things side by side, see what effect switching the light over may have. So I haven't played with this either yet. I'm just, I'm just fiddling around here, noodling around, as they say. So over here there is fog. Let's do that. Fog looks like nothing really. We're just going to put that here and, oops, no, that's the one. Scale it up a little bit. Make sure it just rests on the ground. When you go and move this into the ground, you can see that these little lines get dotted, and that's kind of sunken into the ground. And when you lift them up, they become steady. And at that point, they don't interfere with the ground. There's also something, I don't actually know if it works with fog, but Carrara has this exciting thing in which you can let objects collide with one another. And I believe that's up here. This is this little use collision detection. If you switch that on, you can still push one object through another, but you feel like a slight resistance when you try and do that. So therefore you can make sure objects rest on top of one another without, things hovering. You can literally take a figure or an object and you can just drop it down and it'll kind of stop there. And then if you push further, then it'll go and sink into the other objects. Very exciting stuff. I just don't know if it works with fog, so let's just try it out. No, is the answer. If I try and do that with my sphere, then it just goes and moves really up to down to the floor, and it just stops there. And then if I try really hard, then it sinks itself in. It does the same from the other side. So this is now it bouncing to the bottom of the ground, and it just won't go any further unless I use a bit of force. So it's a very exciting way of using image collision detection here, object collision detection. But I guess the smoke technically isn't an object, so it doesn't really work with that. Just thought I'd try it out. Very cool. So I'll leave the default parameters. Oh no, actually I won't. I'm going to go and crank those up. We've just seen that the default fog isn't actually that noticeable. So I'm going to go and crank the quantity up to 5 and the density to 2. That should be a good start. And then if we go and render that, there we go, it's fog. Very cool. And it's very noticeable against the black background. And it throws a shadow, so that's nice to know. It's kind of a shadow on the ground. That's exciting. And it behaves exactly like the shadow of the sphere. Very cool. Let me make it a bit taller so that the fog goes into the black. And I'll just do that by using my crazy manipulator tool here and making it just slightly taller. There we go. Let's render that again. There we go. That is fog and a half. I like it. So I'm thinking if we wanted a proper fog plane, then I suppose I would make it square, really. I think if I were to use it in a different application and create this effect as an animation, I think I won't do that because I'd like to put this foggy thing, the fog animation, over my own picture later. So that's the idea. I'll see if and how that works. So I'm going to go and create this in 16:9, just like we see it here. So I'll delete everything from my scene, namely the ground plane and the little sphere, and I'll just drag this up so that it fills the whole screen, or at least, you know, most of the screen. And then we can start rendering that image sequence out. So let's get rid of you, and let's get rid of you. And then we have you left, and I guess we're gonna go and scale you up like so. It's now on an angle, so I suppose we can always go and rotate the camera so that we're fully frontal there. I think, once again, I think I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to make sure that the bottom part here is covered by the camera frame. So again, I'm just going to go and remove these things so that we only have a hint of a ground plane. And this is my camera frame, and all of that appears to be covered in fog now. So if I go and render that, I would expect to see a black picture with just full of fog around it. Look at that. That is correct. We do get to see some shadows here. Okay, that's kind of the fog that we've seen, more or less, that we've seen in Subnautica there. So I think that I don't think this takes very long to render. So one frame literally this takes less than a second to render. So I think let's go and render an animation, maybe 2 seconds, 3 seconds, 4 seconds. Let's go 4 seconds. Let's do this thing. 4 seconds. What do you say? 4 seconds. 4 seconds at 30 frames a second. That is roughly. Help me out here, folks. I've not got my calculator with me today. 30, that's 60, that's 120 frames. Is that right? Let's try this out. On the bottom right here, let's go 120. Thank you so much. DreamLab wins a prize. You win 120 frames of fog. How exciting is that? I'm going to go and set this over here to 30 frames. And I think this is the duration of my animation. So this is the current time, and this is the allocated time. So let's go and turn that into 4 seconds. And that also makes this thing at the bottom slightly smaller. This is the timeline, of course, here, as you might have guessed it. And this has all the objects that I've got in my scene here. So this looks very similar to the timeline in DAZ Studio. The universe is basically everything. Then we have master objects, master shaders, all of which can be animated, including sound. So I can also add audio clips to my scene. Luckily, we won't have to deal with that. But in my universe, I currently have a camera, a light, and a fog. And inside these things, I've got, you know, several other items that I can animate. So I can, for example, I can go ahead and animate any of these sliders here over time. That's very, very cool in Carrara. So it's an incredible animation tool. And it does network rendering as well. So if you're rendering animations and you manage to network a few computers together, it'll just, you know, speak to one another and just installs a render node on these computers. Very, very clever. Very much ahead of its time, I think. Each of these black things represents a keyframe, and I'm very happy to say we don't even have to deal with keyframes here at all. All we can do now is literally go over to render this whole 4 seconds out, frame by frame, and head over to the render room and just tell Carrara that we don't want to render a still image anymore, we want to use an animation. So under output, there's image size here that hasn't changed. The rendering camera also hasn't changed, so you can you can have multiple cameras and you can change them around, but only the camera that you specify here will be rendered. So very cool. File format, I say we use PNG or PNG. PNG, is it PNG or ping? I don't know. I think it's PNG, isn't it? I usually say PNG. Some people say ping. I don't know. One of those things. What's your preference? So I'm going to render a movie. So current frame is a still image. Movie means it's the whole animation. But once again, Windows AVI is not what we want. We want a sequenced PNG file. That's really what we're after. and frame rate is 30 frames. So even though my animation is set to something, is already set to 30 frames, I could now go ahead and render this in a different frame rate for preview purposes. For example, if I know that rendering my animation takes 1 minute to render per frame, I've got like 100,000 frames to render, and all I want to see is more or less like an impression of my movie, then I can just render it in 2 frames a second and just see if it all comes out the way I had envisioned it. So that's very exciting. Then down here, I believe that's just about running off the screen now, is either default file name or named file, and that is what I'm going to have to select, and then a little modal dialog comes up on which I'm going to go and render this on my desktop. Perhaps I'll create a new folder and I'll call that Fogcast, like, you know, screencast, Fogcast type thing. That's very cool. In here, I'm going to just call it Fog as the file name and hit save. And that hopefully should now render an image sequence. Shall we give it a go? Let's try it. There we go. We're certainly seeing several images rendered. That's exciting. Are they animating is the next question, of course. I don't know if there's another tick box that we're going to have to tick, but yeah, one of those things. Oh, so Rod says ping. That's interesting. Good to know. I've heard many different, well, these 2 variations really, PNG and ping, and I'm never entirely sure, you know, what the correct one is, or what's correct in May. My God, May 2019. This is being rendered on my new Z600, by the way, with 2 Xeon processors. And that's why there's so many of these squares. If you have a dual core processor, they sometimes are capable of rendering 2 or sometimes 4 threads at the same time. And my computer can do 24 at the same time. It's absolutely mind-blowing. On larger scenes, it's very cool to see that. Okay, so this is that. I believe we have to still save that as something meaningful, like, oh, there we go. No, it's actually done it. There we go. Perfect. So these are now all the images. That's very cool. We can't play this back. No. Even if we do, it's only ever going to play Fox 000 back. So I guess we don't see an animation right here. Let's see what happens if we bring that image sequence into Photoshop. Crank up Photoshop here and turn that into an image sequence. Oh, no, absolutely. That's a very good question, Dreamlab. No, I definitely say GIF. You know, I think that because I think it's an abbreviation for graphics interlaced file, and I don't say graphics. So that's a very good question. Many people say GIF. That's there, and I hate that. I really don't like that. It has to be GIF, I think, in my personal humble opinion. How about you? What do you say? Do you say GIF or do you say GIF? That's true. There's the lazy aspect, Rod. That's true. PNG, that's 3 syllables, and ping is just a single syllable. So that's good. That's very true. GIF and PNG, yes, Christina gets 100 points. Very exciting. Because that's how I would pronounce it as well. We're both German, I guess maybe that's what it is about. So I'm going to go under File, Open, and that should get me my Fogcast. And this, I don't really know what that is. The CSEQM file, I really don't know what that is. I don't think we need it. Maybe Carrara does anything with it. All we need to open is the first image of the ping sequence, and we just select the first one, and then Photoshop will give me this option here, image sequence. And if I don't tick that, then only this image will be opened. But if I tick that and then hit open, then Photoshop should go ahead and, well, look at that, ask me for the frame rate. In our case, that was 30 frames. And then it should turn this into a video layer. Oh, it says click the video icon and add a media to a track. Drag clips to rearrange or combine them. I should try editing in Photoshop. That's an interesting idea. So if we now play that back, I can see that the fog isn't moving. Oh, that's terrible, isn't it? I think we've done something wrong there. That's not what we had expected. So it's rendered the same image 120 times. It's not exactly what we wanted, is it? So yes, let's close that then and go back to Carrara and see how else we can improve that dreadful state of affair here. So let's go and close that, go back to our foxing. I thought there was something that I had forgotten, that there is something over here. I believe it has to do with when this thing has finished, completion. There we go. I think that's what it was supposed to. There's something about the completion thing. I think I have to go and head over to the last frame. And on the last frame, I think the completion has to be 100%. So I mean, that's, you know, that's just what I seem to remember that's how it worked. So that means that if I go back, so this is the completion slider here. If I now go back to my timeline, I'm kind of stepping through it here, and I'm going to the first frame. Oh, there we go. I have to set a keyframe on that in with the completion. Setting a keyframe, of course, works how again in Carrara? I believe create keyframes. There we go. That's probably what it is, isn't it? Create a keyframe. Perfect. And then I've got these lines here. That means this is where it's being interpolated here. And I believe the way this little line looks tells you if it's being interpolated as a straight line or as a curve, or if it's slowing down and easing in at the beginning, easing out at the back. I think that's how it worked. Let's see, if I go and drag this back to the middle, would the completion now say 50%? No. Well, that's a shame, isn't it? Yeah, I don't really know how that works then. What a shame. I should have researched that before I bored you with this video, folks. That's terrible. So, completion. Does it make any difference? I'll just go and try it with completion set to 100% on this keyframe here. And 0 on the first one. No, I'm just going to go and I'm just going to try this again. It didn't take that long to render, so you know, let's see what happens. It'd be nice if we get a preview here. I don't think we get that. We don't get a preview as what this looks like. I'm trying to figure out if I can already see the fog moving, but I don't think I can. Oh no, I can. Actually, I can. I think this is moving now. I've just focused on one little square up here, and it looks like that is definitely going out of the picture now. Am I making it up? Could be that I'm making it up. Oh, right. Did he now? Steve, what's his name? We don't even know how to pronounce Steve's name, let alone whatever he creates. That's crazy. He must be wrong. Yeah, that's how it works. He's wrong. We're right. GIF. GIF is that used to be a cleaning product back in the day. Do you remember that? It was a cleaning product, wasn't it? GIF. Quite clearly. Oh, there we go. So the good news is that while we've been discussing GIFs and GIFs and all that, we have now got a working prototype of our fog here, and it's definitely volumetric. This is something we could have framed out of our animation, but I think you get the picture. It's kind of, you know, it does what it needed to do. All I needed to do is set this completion slider then to 100%. So very, very cool. What do you think we spell as what do we call him? Steve Wilight. Wahalat. Wahalat. Very good. That's right, and it's peanut butter. Rod is so correct. It is peanut butter, which is, you know, this is one thing I found really confusing when we got here, because Jif was the peanut butter, but Jif, I remember, was also like one of those. It's like a powder, and you mix it with water, and then you just go scrubbing. That's right. Yes. Crazy stuff. Well, there we go. So this is now our animated fog. So let's see what happens if I go and turn that into an image sequence in Photoshop. Let's try this all again. File, open, fog, and select image sequence. Frame rate 30, well remembered Photoshop. There we go. Yeah, there we go. I'm bringing this into Photoshop because I want to turn it into a movie file, but I want to use transparency with it, and not every editor lets me do that. I don't know, I don't think Windows AVI uses that, and that's, I think, the only option that you can use out of Carrara natively. So what I need to do in Photoshop to turn this into, to export this as a video file now. And did you say, Rod, did you say that you're using Photoshop for editing? Or did Christina say that? I don't quite remember, but one of you guys made an allegation that one of you edits in Photoshop. I don't think it was Christina. I think you just said it, but I don't think you edit in Photoshop. This is how we get there. We get to File, Export, Render, Video. And this in Photoshop, this is going to now open a kind of a spec down version of the Adobe Media Encoder that usually only ships with Premiere. There we go. That's another tongue breaker. Is it Premiere or is it Premiere? That's a different one. So it's tomorrow. My video, is that a premiere, or is that yeah, that's a premiere, isn't it? That's the first showing of something. That's a premiere. But the Adobe program, I would call that Premiere. Premiere. I'm calling it Premiere. Oh my God, it's difficult. Fogcast. So I'm going to call this one moving fog. .mov. That's going to be added there by default anyway. So it's under users, Jarvis Lewis desktop Fogcast. Perfect. And I'm going to use the Adobe Media Encoder instead of the image sequence, because that would just get us an image sequence. Again, we need the media encoder. Animation quality high is good, but the crucial thing down here is the alpha channel. Straight unmatted is probably good. I think the default is none. We need this to be set to something straight unmatted. And I think, let's just try this out and see where it takes us. And we're doing this so that all the black parts will be transparent. I think that's how it works. Let's just try it out and see what happens. Render. All right. Now see, Rod, I'm in the same dilemma. Did you get my email, my Renderosity site mail about that coupon code I've sent you? Or have they filtered that out? Shotcut, I've looked at that. It's a bit like, to me, Shotcut looked a little bit like Audacity. It's very difficult for me to get it intuitively. I'd need to spend a lot of time to get into it and see if it's how it works. It's not something that I feel I can pick up easily. Moving fog, there we go. If we go and double click that now, let's see if it actually moves. Missing codec. That's good, isn't it? So thanks, Windows. That's good. Luckily, we're not going to use Windows to play that back. I'm going to use OBS. So I'm going to go. You're going to see me twice now. There we go. That's me, I guess, and that's me as well. That's me as well. Lots of me's here. It looks a bit crazy. But what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go to my full camera. There we go. Hello, everybody. Very cool. And I'm going to add an overlay over this. And that overlay is going to be that media source that we've just created. And then hopefully this is all going to I'm going to fog up. That's the plan. Let's see if it works. So I'll go and add a little thing to it here at the bottom. Well, actually, that's not how I do it, is it? There we go. And I'm going to go and add a media source. And in that's going to be the fog overlay. And in the fog overlay, I'm going to go and add a local file, namely the one on my desktop under Fogcast Moving Fog, because I believe that OBS Studio, this is the software we're using here, that's the one that I'm using for streaming, that should hopefully support that codec. There we go. It almost works, but the thing is now it's, I've just got fog over my face. That's not what we want, is it? We wanted for that to be transparent. So for some reason it's not transparent. I wonder why. Why isn't that transparent? Answers on a postcard. Yeah, you say it's easier than Premiere, but the thing is, I guess it's like with so many things, isn't it? I've used Premiere for 20 years, and Premiere is so second nature to me that I find everything else difficult. One of those things. So let's go and try this again with render video. I don't know if what would happen if we were to create another layer underneath this or this. Would that mean we should see something through it? Like, that's what I would expect, unless we've exported this wrong from Carrara. That is also possible. Let's see what happens if we bring that underneath here. No, actually, I wanted to use a solid color here to make the point something red. Does the red shine through? The answer is no, it doesn't. So, or does it? No, it doesn't really, does it? It animates, but it just doesn't get through it. Oh, okay. Layer blending to multiply, yes. Because it's a group, it's set to power. Layer, yes. Multiply. And close, but no cigar. Why does that not work? Yes, it should be the opacity of the actual video layer, right? Rod, that's what you mean, right? Okay, thank you, Christina. So he's going to explain how Shotcut works. That's cool. I'm going to have a look at that. You're scrambling, aren't you, Rod? Me too. I have no idea. We could always tell you what. Let's do something else. Let's go and open this. Let's open a single picture without an image sequence, so that we get rid of the video layer. And we're going to double click on this so that it's just a regular layer. And now we're going to go and create a solid color layer underneath it. And just move that underneath it and see. Yeah, see this. I'm expecting all this black to be transparent already out of Carrara. There we go. Then your multiply actually works. I wonder if we've done something wrong in Carrara. Let's go back there and see if there's anything that we can learn from how to render alpha channel. See, this is what we should have probably ticked and then let this render out. So shall we try this again then? That is exactly what was missing. We're going to go and render the alpha channel while we're doing that. Haha. Absolutely, Christina, absolutely correct. We're rendering an alpha now, and that should do the trick. I can even see the little squares are now being half invisibilized by the fog. So that's a good point. That's a good indication that perhaps the alpha is now working correctly. Do you know, it doesn't matter when you put it in, it's only about great minds thinking alike. This is very cool. We're all on the same level. This is very, very cool. I love it.
You just can't believe them.
90, 91, 92. I have a feeling that the rendering this with the alpha channel is actually taking a little bit longer than without the alpha channel. Interesting. Okay, now it's white. That could be cool, could be disastrous. Let's see, shall we? So back into Photoshop. I'm glad that we all agree on how Photoshop is supposed to be pronounced, though. Let's close this down, not save it, and go and open that again. Make it an image sequence, 30 frames. Bring it on, brother. This could now be just transparent because it's white on transparency. So I'm thinking that is probably what that is. But just to satisfy all our curiosity, if we go and create a solid color layer underneath here, I'm hoping to see fog on top of that. No? No, is that not how it works? I'm going to go and render this out, and then we'll try this again in OBS before we lose our minds. So render video once again. I'll just call it fog with alpha. Alpha fog. There we go. That's cool. Let's go alpha fog. And try this again with the alpha channel exported from Photoshop as well. Boom. Julia has a website called Traveling Banana, by the way. Very exciting. So I'm going to go back to my camera, and there is my old fog overlay that's kind of, you know, blowing out my head. Let's go and change that file into alpha fog. And lo and behold, woo, there we go. It's getting hot in here. How exciting is that? This is good. So it's working. It's like I'm being steamed up. I like that. Very exciting. So let me go and add that, make that large, and now it's almost like it's literally creating the illusion of fog in here. Is that right? Can you see that? That's very cool, isn't it? Woo! Very exciting stuff. So let's try, in order to amplify this effect, let's maybe just copy that. Can I just duplicate that? That'd be kind of cool. It's so hot in here. Turn the aircon on. This is terrible. So I'm not sure if I can duplicate the effect here. Absolutely. You know, maybe we should do that. But this would add a more ambience, as they say, to anything, to literally game streams. And this is very cool. I'm going to try and add another media source with the same fog over that, so that we just amplify that effect. So once again, media source goes on here. I don't think you can see what I'm doing here unless I switch it over to there. There we go. That's it. So local file. I'm going to go and actually just go add a media source over. No, I have to change to the other camera. I can't actually do it. I have to change to this one, and then just go and add another media source to it. And this time I'm going to add the fog overlay again. That should work. That should duplicate that. Perfect. So now we have two fog movies going at the same time. Now it looks even steamier. That is very exciting, isn't it? Woo! I'm so glad we did this. So I think it's probably safe to say that it'll be, yeah, exactly. It's my two Xeon processors. This is, did I mention that the machine gets a little bit hot here? That's what happens. So I guess, yeah, it'd be nice if I can now blow and the fog would move away. That'd be kind of nice. Like, there we go. Oh, it works. It's exciting stuff. So we should be able to use the same principle to create this inside, say Dash Studio, for example. Create a plane and then just add this as a moving video to that. That should be possible. I don't know. It's maybe something to play around with. Tell you what I'll do. I'm going to render this out as a sequence, and then I'll post it up on my website, so you can all grab this or recreate this if you like. And perhaps I'm going to re-render this in 1920 by 1080 and put it up on my Patreon page. I think that's a cool idea. So there we go. I will do that, and then we can all fiddle together and see if this is possible to import this thing into Dash Studio, and then go and create something like moving fog, or even if it's just a still of a fog in Dash Studio in front of a character or something. That'd be really funky. I love to see what you guys do with it. Thank you so much for joining me today. Don't forget, tomorrow we're going to be doing this super awesome double bill with two showings, like, you know, at your local cinema at 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. The introduction to the 5 or 6 part series of the Dash Studio lighting series begins tomorrow, 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Join me for that, for a little chat and a coffee. That'll be like our show for the 4 p.m. happening, which of course is Subnautica Saturday. And it's going to be exciting because we've got a lot of radio messages to listen to, and we'll see what else we can find. Thank you so much. I will see you guys tomorrow. This was exciting. I think this is going to be my standard thing. Whenever I'm full screen, I think I'm going to have these things, these 2 fog overlays over here. This is awesome. Yes, I'm going to do that. I'm going to render this as a longer, maybe like a 10-second or a 30-second sequence, especially with so many computers that I've got here. So I'm going to do that, and then I'm going to make that available to all my Patreons, and that'd be so awesome. Guys, thank you so much for joining me. Take care. Bye-bye.